let me hear your war cry. Oh, thank you for joining me another episode of Beating Cancer Today, the podcast where hope meets action. I'm your host, Kevin Hennings, a stage 4 colorectal cancer survivor. Against all odds, I defied the doctor's predictions and took my health into my own. Now, I'm here to share my journey and alternative methods that help me. But it's not just about my story. It's about yours too. Join me as we navigate through the challenges of cancer together, providing support, insights, and empowerment. Together, we'll beat cancer, one episode at a time. Let me hear your war cry. Oh, welcome all you warriors out there. We have a lot to unpack today, and we are blessed to have a great guest with us today. He's a clinical nutritionist, an author, a retired pharmacist, and he has been involved in clinical research, even owning his own practice. Folks, he's been in the game since 1977 when he first became a pharmacy tech. Geez, how old was I in 77? I was 4. So
wow.
He's climbed the ladder ever since, drawing attention of world-renowned clinical researchers around the globe. And listen, they're all listening to him, so I think we should listen to him also. Keith Bishop, please introduce yourself, brother.
Well, thanks. I'm so excited to be here. So with this session and sharing information. So yes, I started off, years ago. Matter of fact, I'm actually even a trumpet player. In college, I started off in music education. I realized that I would go broke. I wasn't a great musician, so I got to change gears. I have an uncle who is still a practicing pharmacist, and he was a mentor. He's 10 years older than me, so it's not like he's 20 years older, but he was a mentor and got me started. And I loved his one-on-one helping people, talking to the patient. And I thought, that's what I need to do. So I started pharmacy school. I started in 77, pre-pharmacy. Walked into a hospital in Norman, Oklahoma, and got a job in the pharmacy there while I was really pre-pharmacy. And so I've been working in that area ever since. I've stepped outside. I actually don't have a current pharmacy license. I don't need it. I actually do clinical nutrition. I currently do have an office that's inside a pharmacy. And for convenience, I've done some management there. Now I'm going back into more clinical one-on-one patients. So I help actually people with many different health issues, but my expertise is going to be cancer and dementia, Alzheimer's. Those are two diseases my parents did not survive. And I don't want that to happen to me. And I share that with my clients, my family, just everybody I can. So those are my two specialties, dementia and cancer. It's amazing. Matter of fact, actually, it's very similar type things. The food, the things we're going to talk about today is exactly the same thing for both of these chronic diseases that, affect so many people. So, I've done it all, everything from counting pills to now I just, it's appointments and one-on-one consultations. Then I do research, got a lot of information on my website.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have been waiting for this interview. You've been on this schedule for over a month, right? So
you've been trying to get in touch with me.
Yeah. And I am so fascinated because, and we did this little pre-interview thing and where we had a conversation about, I only wanted to talk about cancer originally and everything. But then after talking to you, the combinations or the correlations, I should say, between what we're metabolically putting into our body versus the different diseases that are coming, the dementia, the cholesterol connection, the cancer connection to, we talked about statins as medication for cancer. We've talked about so many things. I want to unpack it all right now, but right off the bat, can you give me your metabolic theory about cancer?
Okay, well, yes. So cancer does love sugar and certain proteins, L-glutamine. Matter of fact, you've had Dr. Seafried on and visit with him, and a great webinar, seminar, podcast. And so cancer loves those things. And matter of fact, cancer is more like a bacteria or fungus, mold, yeast type of thing, and it grows on, matter of fact, the same nutrients our body has to have, all kinds of nutrients. Cancer cells love that, but it seems to kind of like thrive in a a low oxygen level and poor circulation, but excess sugar and glutamine. So I really do kind of concentrate on that aspect, trying to take down the excess calories and various different, everything about timing to eating and quantities, supplements, and then even some prescriptions, trying to help bring those kind of simply. And the easiest thing for most people is thinking about sugars and glucose, for example, and that, and then a few proteins. It's not just glutamine, but that's one of them.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because, I want to touch back on the glutamine versus glucose connection, or comparison rather. But if there's a sugar connection, this seems simple enough. We just starve the cancer, right? We eliminate the sugar, and then that just starves the feeding, right? So it seems simple enough. It creates a cytotoxic effect. It eradicates the disease. Blah blah blah. So how can we eliminate the need to do that? I mean, attacking the current disease and also canceling the invitation for new disease.
Well, and so, it's difficult to knock down that glucose. And so, matter of fact, I have clients that are carnivore, and I mean, they're basically eating primarily only meat, and their blood glucose is still elevated. So our body can make glucose, the liver can make glucose and glycogen, and our body will break down the muscles, that we eat. There are sugars in proteins. There are sugars in our muscles, and our body will break those down, for sugar. So we have to have sugars. So the goal is to try to interrupt that and keep it from just being like readily available. And instead of giving the gift to the cancer cells, we want to knock it down low. Now, our body, our brain, and our heart can definitely survive in those lower glucose levels. And we have to be careful about the energy. So like Saturday, I was out working on the property and working on the horses and trees. And so I actually did break my fast, and I actually ate breakfast because I needed that quick energy while I'm working out there. But the rest of the time, like even today, I'm doing fasting and trying to bring down those glucose levels.
Well, so there's no confusion because, people could get very confused with the glutamine versus glucose, right? So it's very confusing, right? So the glucose levels are generally easier to control with your food intake, yes, right? Yes. Whereas your glutamine is more of an amino acid that yes, you derive.
Amino acid glutamine comes from proteins, and we have to have that, so we do have to have proteins. Hair, skin, nails, bones, neurotransmitters come from proteins. So we have to have them. But part of that goal is we want to limit that exposure. And so I will, so we have to have enough protein to survive, but we don't want to provide too much. And then there's this little trick. So glutamine and glucose, they sound similar. They're not related.
And because glucose is actually controlled by carbohydrates, right?
Carbohydrates, correct, yes.
And the other one's proteins.
Exactly. Glutamine is protein, so they are different. They sound similar, but they are totally different chemicals in the body. And so glutamine, once again, that's where, in this case, we'll say intermittent fasting, going without food for a certain amount of time, will bring down the glutamine level. So therefore, the cancer cells will struggle, for a while. And then if we can do the same thing, actually with intermittent fasting, I call it timed eating for cancer, but we bring the glucose down with intermittent fasting. We bring the proteins down with intermittent fasting. Our body can survive for quite some time without doing those. And then when it is time to eat, I'm doing things to decrease that absorption of the carbohydrates. So foods, the right kind of foods, and I'm doing things to help decrease those glucose and glutamine uses, meaning the absorption of glutamine. It's going to be, I'm getting confused now.
Yeah, you lost
absorption of glucose, and the conversion of proteins into glutamine. So, on some food labels, this is not a food, but I just made a post about toothpaste, but on the ingredient list on some protein powders, it may say L-glutamine if it lists L-glutamine, that means they've added it to the protein powder. Now, that may not be an ideal situation. Matter of fact, my clients, I don't recommend L-glutamine on that list. And so our body can make L-glutamine from those other amino acids, but we try to do intermittent fasting to limit that. And then when I do eat, I'm doing things before the meal to decrease both the glucose and the glutamine conversion from the proteins.
Now, you mentioned the different food groups, so I just have to push into a dairy question that I have.
Okay.
So dairy does have sugar in it, right?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of the people, I know diabetics too, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, I could eat as much cheese as I want because it's dairy. There's no sugar. And that's, whoa, wait a second. There's absolutely sugar in dairy. And oh, no, there's not. Well, you're wrong. Yes, there is. So
now that fermentation process, actually the bacteria does eat and survive and actually grows and replicates and thickens the dairy product that is called that fermentation process. And it does live off of those carbohydrates, the lactose and galactose and things like that. Those OSE, OSE, are sugars. And so, but there still can be sugars in those. And it depends on the cheese. It depends on the dairy product. So actually fermented dairy is a better option than a liquid milk. And so because the fermented dairy products, the yogurts, the cheeses, have to be careful about kefirs. A lot of times they actually add sugars back into those so they're sweet enough so people will drink it. Read those labels. And so we have to be careful about the dairy. And then there's a little bit of a weird thing. So actually, us guys, actually, even if it's a fermented dairy, have a significant increased risk of prostate cancer. So it doesn't make a difference what kind of dairy for men in prostate cancer. Other cancers aren't quite the same, but something's going on about the prostate, and I haven't figured that out. Researchers are still trying to figure it out.
Well, before, because I have some prostate questions for you also, but before I get into the specific different kinds of cancers, because, there's so much to talk about, right? The metabolic message, right? The metabolic, we talked about it before, and the metabolic message, it's starting to circulate, all right? It's starting to hit a little mainstream, and it's becoming loud and clear, but we're ignoring it because of guerrilla marketing and propaganda and the indoctrination of the medical schools, where the curriculum's written by Big Pharma, which is tragic, right? If you consider the amount of time in medical school that is actually spent on nutrition, right? So just the fact that this is getting mainstream attention now, and it's shown to be effective. There's no disputing it. Everybody who has gone to this metabolic theory, if they are able to get ahead of their disease, has had success. That in conjunction with their medications and whatnot. But I'm not vilifying anything, to be clear. What I'm saying is, if you change your lifestyle, that is conducive to healthy living. I think that promotes it maximizes the efficacy of whatever treatments you're doing.
Right.
Fair?
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. Cancer and dementia. Matter of fact, since I do searches in those two areas, and it's like I get all kinds of news articles popping up, and and again, another research article just came out about dementia and lowering calorie intake and lowering food quantities. Another study. So we just keep getting more and more about these chronic diseases. Overall, as a society, we have a tendency to eat too much food.
You don't say.
Yeah. And so, it's like,
You don't say. We are like, that's one of the 7 deadly sins, right? So we are absolute gluttons in this society.
we are.
And
Yeah.
this intermittent fasting that you talked about was just, it's genius and so simple, right? I mean, I don't have the discipline to avoid sugars and be selective in my meals, and discipline, right? I don't have that sometimes, but I do have the discipline for absence, right? If I don't have the discipline to choose, but I do have the discipline to completely eliminate. Right. So for me, intermittent fasting is like the best in the world because I feel so good. Right. But I mean, if just changing our lifestyle, was the answer, which clearly it is effective. I mean, my dad has come off of years of insulin being a type 2 diabetic, and he's a transplant recipient. So he's coming off of medications now, bang, 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 that now he's all the way down to just anti-rejection stuff. I mean, it's amazing. His lifestyle is completely different now. So it just seems to be the answer to everything. Like, have we just gotten so consumed in our society that we are such sheep with the guerrilla marketing and we just believe anything that they put on TV? I mean, because every commercial that comes across my TV and between the news stations and everything is Keytruda or Ozempic or these big pharma commercials.
Mhm.
Is it just a mind game? What's going on here?
Well, it's money driven. I mean, and so we have the big corporations. They can afford to do that advertising, and they've made it so that nobody else can do that advertising on those media type things. But things like this, these podcasts are fantastic. And so sharing this information, literally, thousands of people are going to get to see this, or hear this, and it's going to be great. And they're going to.
I'm hoping in the millions, but thank you.
Exactly. We want to get this out there, but that's where we're starting to see some impact with it. The food companies they seem to be getting a little bit more aggressive in some of their marketing type things, because actually their sales are starting to be impacted. The soda pop companies, they're branching out, they're buying other companies, kind of like the tobacco companies. The tobacco companies aren't a tobacco company anymore. They own all kinds of stuff. Well, the food and beverage companies are the same type of thing. They own all kinds of foods, and even, but they really don't want people to make that change. They want to sell their fast food and keep the price low enough so it's tempting to buy it, so that it seems like it's cheaper to buy food going out to eat than it does fixing it at home. And so that's a common belief, although I really feel like that, and I think it's so much cheaper to eat at home.
Well, nowadays, with the service being bad, the food being kind of halfway good, I mean, the people don't take the pride in what they used to do at restaurants, right? So I don't really know that I get any better ambiance and certainly not better food than when I just do it at my house, so that, and gosh, everything's so expensive now. So, but you know what? We kind of talked about the different commercials and stuff. If this Ozempic thing, I mentioned it before, and I mean, that's one of the gazillion ones, right, that I've seen on TV. But now people are starting to do this stuff for weight loss and excuse me, they're doing it for weight loss, and as I understand it, it disrupts the body's fascination with sugar or something, right? So if that's a viable medication, maybe a diabetes medication or whatever, would it be effective for combating cancer, you think? How would this compare in the efficacy of berberine?
Yes. And so, so the semaglutide type molecules that are in these injectables, and even there's some compounding pharmacies even making oral solutions you can dissolve in the mouth under the tongue and things like that, trying to get that absorbed. But what they do is they decrease the absorption of carbohydrates, in the gut, in the sugars in the stomach and in the intestines. And then there's some other factors that we're now learning. Even people actually just don't seem to be wanting to eat. And so there's something else going on in the brain, and I've not seen exactly what that is, but they don't want to eat. They're not as hungry. And then also other addictive behaviors. And so, for example, alcohol dependence and drug dependence. So that's going to be another use of these type molecules for that. Yes, there are other options that, well, let me go back. You mentioned something about cancer and that, and semaglutide. Actually, I haven't studied that, but I would expect that it could be a factor, because number one, they're not going to eat as much. And number two, they're not going to absorb the carbohydrates, therefore. So I'm sure there's going to be some studies and probably a version of it, and or approval for use for cancer. But then also, I've also seen, major issues about gut happening, paralysis, and then loss of too much muscle and whole body because they're not eating enough.
So that's kind of where I'm going with this. And really the question is like, in my mind, I think about like in Sunday school, right? Where they're talking about Adam and Eve going through the Garden of Eden. And I'm talking about the basic, fundamental, most elementary religious story, right? So, the temptation factor, and when I started changing my lifestyle, that sugar is so addictive. Like I had such urges for sugar. It was like a heroin, like an opiate. I had to have it. And it was so intoxicating. So it kind of reminds me of walking through the Garden of Eden, right? Like, because we read these stories and we all have different things, visions in our mind, right? That's what makes reading so great. We paint the story ourselves. So I start thinking about this and I'm thinking, how much sugar was in that apple? It was so hard to stop the sugar, And one of my friends said to me, if you can't control what you're putting in your mouth, that is weak. And he made me feel so. Oh, yeah. He really shamed me. So I remind myself of that every day. I'm like, oh, you can't be weak. But it's like a physical addiction.
But there is a physical problem though with that. And so what happens is, if you eat in those carbohydrates, well, like fruits give you enough, sugars and energy basically for 1, maybe 2 hours. And then that sugar and the sugar level is high. And then after 2 hours, it's crashing. You have to eat again to feel good. Because in that time period here, you're going hypoglycemic, your brain's not functioning right, your stomach's bothering you, and you may even feel anxious and depressed and things like that. And then when you eat again, and once again those sugars, it instantly brings up your blood glucose, even your neurotransmitters, come up. Even dopamine may be going up, which is a rewarding feel-good chemical because you just actually did something that you're not supposed to. That's rewarding, and for cheating or whatever, And so there's several things involved. And then 2 hours later, you're crashing again and you've got to eat again. And so by going with
perpetual cycle.
It is. And so by going with, intermittent fasting, going long enough without the food, it's easier just to turn it away. And because your body has learned, like I've learned, my body's learned how to burn fat for energy. And therefore I don't have those lows and those crashes. And for example, for me, I recognize even when I was in college, I didn't know why it was happening, but I would go literally hypoglycemic while I was driving to college, just, like 2 hours, 3 hours away. I was falling asleep, and I didn't know why, and I could not figure it out. I now know why. I still make even longer treks, taking the horse trailer equipment and things to the mountains and stuff. But I don't eat while I'm doing that, because I especially junk food on the highway, stopping at those bad places, make those bad choices. My blood glucose will drop and I'll go sleepy.
Yeah.
And so I'll take my own nuts, and drink some coffee, water, maybe tea unsweetened, and just snack on some things, healthy snacks, and do fantastic.
Yeah. See, that's you have that discipline to do that. That's where intermittent fasting is so great for me, because it 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 creates an absence of choice.
Yes.
Like I don't, if I eliminate it altogether, I don't have to choose good or bad food. It's just no food. So for me, it's because I'm a weak person, right? My friend was right. So
maybe you're weak, but that's not an unusual thing. So matter of fact, we don't have ice cream in our house.
Yeah. It's the absence of ice cream that makes you not eat ice cream.
Exactly. It takes us almost 20 minutes to go into town to go get an ice cream cone, and then 20 minutes and then 20 minutes back. So it's like an hour-long project. So it's not like we're going to do that often. I'm not saying I never do that, but it's since we don't have it here.
Keith, sometimes the juice is worth the squeeze,
Well, and so we will do that, but we don't have it here at the house, because we would do it every single day.
Yeah, I know, absolutely
need that. My wife and I both have kind of like similar family histories about dementia and cancer, and so we've just got to get rid of some things, and ice cream or desserts. It doesn't make not just ice cream, but desserts. If somebody gives us a pie or a cake or something, I'm going to eat it every single day until it's gone.
Yeah, so, you don't want it to go bad, certainly, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You know what? Let me ask you this. Talking about nutrition, right? Let me ask you this. You are a certified nutritionist. You are just global on the pod circuit. You're just a wealth of information, and very well researched and very well studied. I got to ask you this one huge question. How is that for the buildup? Diet versus lifestyle, carnivore or a balanced diet. How God built us biologically, our skeletal system, our teeth, our jaw, our intestinal breakdown, etc. The digesting a single meal to evacuation taking 24 hours versus stacking meals, eating 3 times a day, not intermittent fasting. So there's 3 different topics all in one question, right? But carnivore versus balanced. Okay. What's your take on that?
Yeah. I think balanced, and we just, everything you mentioned, everything from the way our body's made, the way our mouth is made, it's a combination, the way our gut is made, it's a combination. And so, if we want to go back to that biblical example, even, the original Garden of Eden was probably a plant type situation. Whenever man was kicked out, and then we had the flood, and God said, "I've given you everything, now, animals and plants. I believe it should be a balanced type thing. I do have I believe also in the ketogenic type diet, meaning actually it's a moderate protein, higher fat, and then a lower carb type diet. But I integrate, I call it cancer keto, but it's actually plant priority or plant-based ketogenic, along with intermittent fasting and, quantity limits, a combination of things. Our body's made for that combination. Over the years, some of the most unhealthy people I see are vegans. It's a challenge, and I'm not saying impossible. It's a major challenge to get all your nutrients that a person needs from plants. An expert could do it, but most people just don't have that experience and that knowledge to do it. So in my type of program, I allow up to 1 animal protein a day. But I say up to, meaning, if there's a vegan, they don't have to do the animal protein, but I do allow up to that. I do eat one animal protein a day, typically, not always, and sometimes less. And then at least, one serving of legumes or beans, and then also kind of like my third serving of proteins is probably actually two different servings of nuts and seeds.
Now, some nuts, aren't they legumes anyway? Or like, isn't a peanut? Isn't that just a
Exactly? Yeah, a peanut is kind of different than a tree or a plant seed. Yes,
Okay.
and so peanuts are actually more of a legume, and so it's a little bit different. And and actually peanuts, even peanuts, which are a legume, are shown consistently to reduce the risk of cancers. The only time that's not a factor is this aflatoxin, moldy type issue, since it is a plant, a root product, and in some countries, some areas, way it's stored, it may have a tendency to increase the risk of aflatoxins, which is more like a liver cancer type issue.
But the nuts actually don't they lower your blood sugar?
Yes. Oh, yes. So yeah, nuts, even peanuts, nuts and seeds lower your blood glucose. And so it's a combination. Actually, there's limited carbs. I can't say none. Some actually have more than others. There's a few that are probably not great. One of them is not even a common one, but actually I just say all nuts and seeds are okay. But it's a combination of fat and proteins. And therefore, when you're eating, and fiber. And so when you're eating those, you're getting all kinds of great nutrients. So, eating the nuts and seeds, even with matter of fact, even my legumes, my beans, I will actually put a few, we call them pecans here in Oklahoma, but pecans, in that, along with olive oil and some supplements with that serving of beans. And my blood glucose 2 hours later is actually lower than it was before I ate.
Wow. So, well, you know what? I'm sorry, and I don't mean to jump, but you had just mentioned the oil, that made me think, because my brain is crazy and it works weird, but it made me think of cholesterol. Now, cholesterol cholesterol is a precursor for estrogen and testosterone, right? And for hormone-driven cancers, let's talk about that, where cholesterol will play a part.
Yes. So, yes, cholesterol is actually...
Hold on a second. Can you see how my brain just worked?
Yeah.
It's crazy in there. It's crazy in there, Keith. I'm telling you.
We're a lot alike. And so it's tempting for me to make my notes over here. And here's something else we're going to talk about. But cholesterol is actually physically required to make our hormones. So cholesterol is actually it is actually a hormone. We have to have it, and it does serve purposes. But some cancers are kind of like driven. Well, all cells in our body have hormone receptors, including cancer cells. And for some of these cancers, especially some gut cancers, have a tendency to be estrogenic. Prostate cancer and breast cancer are the primary ones that have some estrogenic type actions, meaning estrogens and hormones can attach to those cells. Now they're going to function better. If there's a cancer cell, that cancer cell is going to function better and grow better. So this is really a controversial type thing. But cholesterol, it can be a food for some cancers. It is an energy source, and it can be a food. We can't avoid it. So once again, we have to, try to time some things that we can. But cholesterol is kind of like stored in the body, like hormones. And so there's always going to be a certain amount of it. There is some research showing for cancer and dementia that taking a prescription drug to lower cholesterol levels down does reduce the risk of cancer growth, cancer risks, and dementia risks. Even though there's controversies, about those drugs.
Because I kind of heard there is a connection between dementia and statin drugs, lowering cholesterol.
I know. And so I'm just presenting the facts. And so there are also studies showing that by lowering, so it's actually targeted, meaning If we have a person that has a familial or family history of dementia and their cholesterol is high and their triglycerides are high, that person, we've got to do some interventions, okay? Because, that situation is going to make that person have plaque buildup, decrease circulation to the brain, and that's going to start a cascade effect in the brain. So targeting people and lowering some people's cholesterol can help reduce the risk of dementia. So actually, there are conflicting studies, but there are a lot of studies showing benefits of statins, reducing the risk and maybe even enhancing brain activity. So once again, there's a lot of conflicting information about that. And that could be a 3 or 4 hour podcast.
Yeah, well, because you're talking about the research, but one thing that they're not taking into consideration in their research are statistics. And statistically, for the past 2 years, the administering of statin drugs and the diagnosis of Alzheimer's and dementia, and also some other stuff, it has increasingly gone up together. It's been parallel with the rise. And you have to ask yourself, doing the research, if there's a correlation between the two.
Yeah. So we got to figure that out.
Yeah. I mean, you can't do research without considering all of the information, right?
That's correct. Oh, yes. And it is complicated, so there are the cholesterol issues, the other food and lifestyle, and so many things that are in aging population.
Well, not only is it complicated, but it opens up a few more doors, because if there's a correlation between that and cancer, then that opens up a whole nother treatment for cancer, being a statin.
That is correct. And actually, and in my specialty, I thrive and mentally and emotionally, on doing natural things. I mean, that is my emphasis. That's one reason why I'm not a registered pharmacist any longer, because I want to step outside of traditional treatments. But, there is some research showing, so if we can decrease cholesterol levels, cancer cells struggle. Okay. So, but it's the same thing. So we got glucose.
You just made a direct connection there.
Yeah, exactly. So we got glucose, we've got proteins, we got cholesterol, vitamins and minerals. I mean, so cancer cells will use everything. So if we can target certain things and interrupt that growth process, cancer cells will struggle. And so but we can't just do one thing. So just going out and taking a statin drug, or going out and taking Ozempic, or going out and taking even berberine. Hopefully we can talk about that. And we can't just rely on one thing, because cancer cells are going to adapt.
Well, all of these things that you're talking about relying on, without the change in lifestyle, are moot point. They're all moot points. Now, talking about cholesterol, though, because I want to really key in on your specialties, right? So I know that you're big in on the cholesterol. So HDL versus LDL, versus what your liver produces, and versus the effects of statin drugs, versus brain disease, right? So comparing all of these different things, HDLs, LDLs, what your liver produces being the LDLs, right? So the effects of statin drugs suppressing those things. Now, is it suppressing them from your diet, or is it suppressing them from what your liver's producing? Because if I change my diet and it's still suppressing what my liver's producing, now we have a problem, right?
Right. And so most statin drugs actually work in the liver, to decrease the cholesterol that the liver's making. So, matter of fact, our body's going to make it. And so we're talking about decreasing it, not talking about totally knocking it out. Although the higher the dose of a statin drug, the greater the lower it's going to go.
But hold on. I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt, right? But my question is, though, if my cholesterol is all out of whack because I'm a fat slob and I have no discipline with my diet, right?
Okay.
If that's me, right? If I'm that guy and I'm just a slave to food and my cholesterol is high, my face all red and right, because I was that guy, right? So if I am that guy and they say, hey, your cholesterol is high, Kevin, here's some statin drugs, you really need to control your diet and, do this and that. So I completely changed my lifestyle. My cholesterol plummets. Mm-hmm. But now I'm on these statin drugs and they're suppressing what my liver's making.
Right.
And what my liver's making is making what is required to heal my body. Cholesterol is a healing agent.
Right. Yeah, we have to have it. Right.
And 75% of your brain is cholesterol, if not more, right? So why am I suppressing what my body's creating? I've already changed my lifestyle to eliminate the excess cholesterol anyway. Mm-hmm. I think this is a slippery slope. Am I crazy?